Your emotions are controlling you. Right now, at this very moment, they decide what you say, how you react, who you become when the pressure hits. And that's exactly why you're not where you want to be. Because people who are ruled by their emotions are ruled by their circumstances. They react instead of responding. They explode instead of acting. They are controlled by everyone and everything around them. But there is another way, a way that the most powerful people understand. Emotional control is not about suppressing feelings. It's about learning to separate feeling from action. It's about reprogramming your mind so that emotions keep you informed about yourself, but never control you. That's the psychology of emotional control. And it's the difference between being powerful and being powerless. Chapter 1. Emotions are data, not commands. Your emotions are not instructions. They are information. They are data points, signals from your body and brain about your current state, not commands you must obey. That's the distinction that separates the reactive from the disciplined. That's the key. Most people live as if every emotion is an order. They feel anger and they lash out. They feel fear and they retreat. They feel anxiety and they avoid. They feel hurt and they withdraw. This automatic emotion-to-action loop runs their entire life. It ruins relationships, sabotages opportunities, and keeps them stuck in cycles of regret. You have a choice. You can either obey your emotions, or you can observe them. One path keeps you reactive. The other path makes you powerful. 1. Understanding the real function of emotion. Emotions are not random. They are data from your nervous system, a feedback mechanism designed to keep you alive and aligned. Anger is data. It signals that a boundary has been crossed. Anxiety is data. It signals uncertainty or lack of control. Sadness is data. It signals loss or disconnection. Joy is data. It signals alignment and progress. The mistake is not feeling them. The mistake is obeying them. When you confuse information with instruction, you surrender control. You hand the steering wheel to your emotions and wonder why your life swerves out of lane. Emotion says, I'm uncomfortable. Discipline says, thank you for the data. Now I'll decide what to do with it. That's the key. 2. The emotion-to-action trap. Reactive people treat emotions like orders from a superior. They don't pause. They don't interpret. They execute whatever feeling arises. Anger appears, they attack. Fear appears, they retreat. Insecurity appears, they overcompensate. This is how you become predictable, manipulable, and weak. The disciplined person sees the same emotion, but inserts choice. They feel anger, but instead of reacting, they identify the data. A boundary was crossed. Then they act strategically. I will address this boundary calmly, not destructively. They feel anxiety, but respond with structure. I'll create a plan instead of spiraling. They feel sadness and respond with reflection. What needs to be let go? You can't stop emotions from arising, but you can stop obeying them. That's the key. 3. The space between feeling and action. Every emotion creates an impulse, a burst of chemical energy that says do something. That impulse lasts seconds. If you can survive those seconds without acting, you reclaim control. In that space, you can ask, what is this emotion telling me? Is this feeling based on fact or perception? What action serves my long-term goal, not my short-term comfort? That pause, just a few seconds, is where emotional control lives. That's where power starts. Because once you train yourself to observe before acting, every emotion becomes useful instead of destructive. You have a choice. Always. 4. Emotional literacy. Learning the language of data. Most people fail at emotional control because they lack emotional literacy. They can't read the data. They label everything stress, bad, or good, instead of identifying specifics. But general labels lead to general reactions. Anger has shades: irritation, frustration, rage. Anxiety has types: anticipation, uncertainty, fear. Sadness has layers: loss, guilt, disappointment. When you can name what you're feeling precisely, you can decode the message behind it. Specific language creates specific power. Instead of "I'm mad," try "I'm frustrated because I expected cooperation and didn't get it." Now you have data. Now you can decide if you need a conversation, a boundary, or a new expectation. That's the difference between reacting and leading. It's not about feeling less. It's about understanding more. That's the key. 5. The elite mindset of emotional separation. Every elite performer understands one truth: emotions are inevitable, but reactions are optional. Surgeons feel fear when operating on a critical patient, but they separate feeling from performance. Special Forces soldiers feel adrenaline under fire, but they separate fear from execution. Athletes feel pressure in championships, but they separate nerves from motion. They don't suppress emotions. They use emotions as data. Fear says, "Be alert." Anger says, "Protect your boundary." Anxiety says, "Prepare." Then they execute based on discipline, not emotion. You can build this same architecture. It's not about becoming emotionless. It's about using emotions as instruments, not instructions. 6. The framework for emotional control. Here's the framework you apply every time emotion spikes. Identify. Name the emotion with precision. Interpret. Ask what message it's sending. Decide. Choose the response that aligns with your purpose, not your impulse. Act. Execute the decision calmly and decisively. That's it. Simple, but not easy. Because discipline never is. You'll fail at first. You'll react. You'll say things you shouldn't. But every failure is feedback. Every slip is another chance to practice the pause. Over time, this framework becomes automatic. You won't need to control your emotions. They'll operate through the system you've built. 7. Real-world application. You receive criticism at work. Emotion says, defend. You apply the framework. Identify. I feel defensive. Interpret. My ego feels challenged. Decide. My goal is improvement, not validation. Act. Thank them for the feedback. Analyze later. You argue with your partner. Emotion says, win the fight. You pause. Identify. I feel angry. Interpret. I feel unheard. Decide. My goal is resolution, not domination. Act. Speak calmly once I'm clear. You lose an opportunity. Emotion says, quit. You assess. Identify. I feel disappointed. Interpret. I want control over the outcome. Decide. My goal is growth. Act. Review lessons and move forward. This is not emotional suppression. This is emotional translation. That's the key. 8. The transformation. When you begin to treat emotions as data, you stop fearing them. You stop apologizing for them. You stop being owned by them. You start studying them. You start learning from them. You start mastering them. The world doesn't change, but your interface with it does. Every conversation, every conflict, every setback becomes manageable because you're not reacting to noise. You're reading information. You've rewired the default system from feel, act to feel, analyze, act. You've replaced emotion-driven chaos with data-driven clarity. That's emotional control. That's power. 9. Transition. This is the first step toward mastery. Understanding that emotions are not your enemies, they're your messengers. You no longer obey them blindly. You interpret them intelligently. You've separated feeling from action. You've reclaimed control. But awareness alone isn't enough. You need to master the gap, the space between what happens to you and what you do next. That space is where every bit of your power lives. Chapter 2. The gap between stimulus and response. Every decision you regret began the same way. Something happened, and you reacted too fast. You didn't think. You didn't pause. You didn't choose. You just reacted. And that instant, automatic reaction cost you control. That's the trap most people never escape. They live on autopilot, stimulus, reaction, regret. Someone insults them. They lash out. A challenge appears. They panic. A setback hits. They quit. Their emotions dictate their actions, and their impulses decide their outcomes. You have a choice. You can live like that, or you can learn the discipline of the gap. That's the key. 1. The principle that changes everything. Viktor Frankl gave the blueprint for emotional freedom. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. That space is the difference between reaction and response, between chaos and control, between weakness and strength. Most people have no space. They move from stimulus to reaction instantly, like a reflex. They are ruled by emotion, not reason, by impulse, not intention. The goal of emotional control is simple. Expand the gap. Stretch that space between what happens and what you do next. Milliseconds of awareness become seconds of power. Seconds of power become habits of discipline. And habits of discipline become a life that runs on control, not chaos. That's the key. 2. The anatomy of the gap. Let's break it down. Stimulus. Something happens. A comment. A setback. A trigger. Emotion. Your brain releases chemicals. Adrenaline. Cortisol. Dopamine. Your body prepares for fight, flight, or freeze. Impulse. Your nervous system screams, do something. Yell. Argue. Quit. Escape. Response. You obey or you pause. That pause is the gap. That's where discipline lives. It's the split-second choice between emotional slavery and emotional command. You don't need to eliminate emotion. You just need to insert a pause long enough to evaluate it. That's where all your power hides. 3. The power inside the pause. The gap doesn't need to be long. It just needs to exist. 3 seconds can change everything. 3 seconds to breathe. 3 seconds to question. 3 seconds to choose strategy over reaction. In those 3 seconds, you ask, what am I feeling right now? Does this reaction serve me or sabotage me? What's the most effective move? Not the most emotional one. You have a choice in those 3 seconds. You can protect your energy. You can preserve your reputation. You can keep your power. That's the difference between leaders and victims. Victims react. Leaders respond. 4. Building the gap through practice. You don't expand the gap in crises. You expand it in calm. You train it when the stakes are low, so it's automatic when the stakes are high. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Pause before honking. Someone criticizes you online. Pause before replying. Someone interrupts you in conversation. Pause before snapping. Every pause is a rep. Every rep rewires your brain. You're teaching your nervous system that emotion is not command. You're reprogramming your default from reaction to reflection. At first, you'll fail. You'll catch yourself mid-reaction and wish you'd paused earlier. That's normal. That's training. Each failure is feedback. Each pause is progress. You're building an emotional muscle. Repetition is the only path to strength. 5. The science behind the space. Here's what's happening under the surface. The amygdala detects threat and fires emotion instantly. It wants you to act fast. The prefrontal cortex is slower. It handles logic, analysis, decision-making. When you pause, even for a few seconds, you give your prefrontal cortex time to catch up. You shift from reaction to reason, from chemistry to clarity. That's not philosophy, it's neuroscience. People with emotional control don't suppress their feelings, they sequence them. Emotion first, pause, logic next, action last. That's the framework. That's the discipline. 6. Applying the gap in real life. You receive criticism at work. Your instinct: defend. Pause. Ask, is this feedback or provocation? If it's feedback, apply it. If it's provocation, ignore it. You just kept your power. Your partner says something sharp. Your instinct: retaliate. Pause. Ask, am I solving the problem or escalating it? Choose silence or clarity, not heat. You just preserve the relationship. A deal falls through. Your instinct: blame yourself or quit. Pause. Ask, what's the lesson? Extract the data. Adjust. Move forward. You just turned emotion into information. The gap is not about freezing. It's about redirecting. It's not hesitation. It's precision. That's the key. 7. What happens when you lose the gap? When you lose the gap, you lose yourself. You send the text you regret. You say the words you can't take back. You make the decision that destroys your momentum. And then you tell yourself, I couldn't help it. That's the lie of the reactive mind. You could help it. You just didn't pause long enough to realize it. The more you obey impulse, the smaller your gap becomes. The smaller your gap, the less control you have. Until one day you're fully reactive, emotionally volatile, mentally scattered, physically exhausted. The goal is not to erase emotion. The goal is to stretch the space where choice lives. That's the key. 8. The discipline of the gap. You must train the gap daily. No exceptions. No excuses. The process. Notice the trigger. Pause. Breathe. Count to 3. Name the emotion. Ask what action serves your mission. Execute only after clarity returns. That's the discipline. That's emotional strength in motion. You can't control stimulus. You can always control response. That's the ultimate freedom. 9. The transformation. Once the gap becomes your default, everything changes. You stop saying things you regret. You stop making decisions from anger or fear. You stop letting people control your emotions. Your composure becomes power. Your silence becomes strength. Your pause becomes presence. People will start calling you calm, unshakable, even intimidating. They'll think it's personality. It's not. It's training. It's discipline. It's control. That's the key. 10. Transition. You've learned the foundation. Your power lives in the gap. Every pause strengthens control. Every delay between stimulus and response is a rep in emotional mastery. You now understand that emotion is data and pause is power. But knowing isn't enough. You must also stop explaining, defending, and rationalizing your emotions. Because the next trap is subtle. It's the need to justify your feelings instead of commanding them. You've mastered the pause. Now let's master permission. Chapter 3. Stop explaining your emotions. Explaining your emotions is the most common form of hidden weakness. Most people don't even realize they're doing it. They think they're being self-aware, transparent, or emotionally intelligent. They're not. They're seeking permission to feel what they already feel. And that's emotional slavery. You don't need anyone's permission to feel. You don't need to justify your emotions. You don't need to build a courtroom argument for why your anger, sadness, or fear is valid. It's valid because it exists. That's the key. 1. Emotional slavery disguised as honesty. The moment you start explaining your emotions, you've already surrendered control. You've handed authority over your internal state to someone else. I'm angry because you did this. I'm anxious because they said that. I'm hurt because they didn't respond. Listen to the pattern. Because ties your emotion to an external cause. Because chains your inner world to outer circumstances. And because makes you a prisoner of your own explanation. You have a choice. You can live as the defendant in your own emotional courtroom, or you can dismiss the case entirely. You can stop explaining and start commanding. That's the key. 2. The difference between explanation and acknowledgement. Here's the distinction that separates the disciplined from the reactive. Explanation is justification. It's the ego trying to make the emotion look reasonable. It's, I'm angry and I'm right to be angry. It's, I'm hurt and someone should fix it. Acknowledgement is ownership. It's, I feel anger. Full stop. No justification. No story. No permission seeking. Just awareness. Acknowledgement creates power because it separates the emotion from identity. You're not angry. You're experiencing anger. You're not anxious. You're experiencing anxiety. That one linguistic shift puts you back in control. When you acknowledge without explaining, you cut the link between emotion and reaction. You're saying, this is data, not command. You're saying, I choose what happens next. That's the difference between being emotional and being emotionally disciplined. 3. The trap of emotional justification. Most people justify emotions to feel right. But being right doesn't make you powerful. Control does. Every time you defend your feelings, you reinforce the belief that they need defense. You're saying, my feelings only matter if others agree. You're saying, I'll stop being angry if you understand me. That's emotional dependency disguised as communication. It's not about validation. It's about regulation. You can't lead your life if you need the world to co-sign your emotions. Stop explaining why you feel what you feel. Start deciding what you'll do about it. That's the key. 4. Emotional ownership in action. Here's how this works in real life. Someone disrespects you. Your old response, I'm angry because they shouldn't have said that. Your new response, I feel anger. What action protects my peace and goals? You receive criticism. Your old response, I'm anxious because I don't want them to think I'm bad at my job. Your new response, I feel anxiety. What can I learn or improve? You experience rejection. Your old response, I'm hurt because they didn't choose me. Your new response, I feel hurt. What story am I telling myself? And does it serve me? See the shift? Explanation keeps you trapped in story. Acknowledgement moves you into strategy. That's emotional control in motion. 5. The internal debate that drains power. Explainers don't just argue with others. They argue with themselves. I shouldn't feel this way. Maybe I'm overreacting. I have every right to feel this. All of that is noise. It's internal bureaucracy, mental paperwork that keeps you stuck in analysis instead of execution. You don't need to debate your emotions. You just need to notice them, name them, and move forward. You have a choice. Endless explanation or immediate execution. Only one builds strength. That's the key. 6. Permission is a trap. Most people spend their lives chasing emotional permission. They want someone to validate their pain, confirm their anger, or excuse their fear. They post about their struggles, hoping for comments that say, you're right. They vent to friends, not to solve problems, but to be told they're justified. But here's the truth. Permission doesn't equal progress. Validation doesn't equal victory. You don't need the world to agree with how you feel to take action. Emotionally controlled people don't ask, is it okay that I feel this way? They say, I feel this way, and here's what I'm doing next. That's power. That's leadership. You have a choice. You can keep waiting for permission, or you can act without it. 7. The strategic response framework. Here's the practical process. Notice the emotion. I feel anger. Name it precisely. I feel frustration because something feels unfair. Drop the story. That's the data. I don't need to justify it. Ask the question, what action serves my mission right now? Execute. Move forward based on logic, not emotion. You're not denying feelings, you're directing them. You're turning emotion into intelligence. That's emotional strategy. 8. How the elite operate. Elite performers don't waste time explaining feelings. They use feelings as tools. A Navy SEAL feels fear before a mission. He doesn't say, I'm scared because the mission is dangerous. He says, I feel fear. That means my body is preparing. Execute the plan. A surgeon feels pressure during a critical procedure. She doesn't say, I'm anxious because this is high stakes. She says, I feel pressure. Focus on the next step. A CEO feels anger during a negotiation. He doesn't say, I'm mad because they disrespected my proposal. He says, I feel anger. Use that energy to negotiate harder. They all have emotions. They just refuse to explain them. Because explanation is distraction, and distraction is death in high performance. You don't need a reason to feel. You need a response to lead. That's the key. 9. The transformation. When you stop explaining your emotions, several things happen. You conserve energy. You eliminate drama. You stop giving others control over your internal world. You become calm without suppression. You become confident without arrogance. You become composed without effort because you finally understand. You don't control emotion by fighting it. You control it by owning it. Emotion acknowledged is emotion neutralized. Emotion justified is emotion amplified. Stop being your own lawyer. Start being your own leader. That's the key. 10. Transition. You've learned to acknowledge emotions without explaining them. You've taken back power from every, because in every why. You no longer need permission to feel. You already have authority. But awareness and ownership aren't enough. You also need a process to stop emotional spirals before they take over. Because the next level of emotional control isn't about explanation, it's about interruption. You've stopped explaining your emotions. Now let's stop spiraling through them. Chapter 4. The emotional spiral versus the emotional audit. Every breakdown starts as a single thought, a single emotion, a single spark that catches fire because you never learned to interrupt it. That's the emotional spiral, an endless loop where thoughts feed emotions, emotions feed thoughts, and the cycle spins until you lose control. You've lived it 1,000 times. A minor problem turns into a crisis. A small mistake turns into self-hate. A moment of anxiety turns into a full panic. Not because the event was catastrophic, but because you gave the spiral permission to run unchecked. You have a choice. You can keep spiraling, or you can learn to audit. That's the key. 1. The mechanics of a spiral. The emotional spiral starts small. You feel a slight discomfort, anxiety, frustration, uncertainty. Your mind immediately searches for an explanation. What if this means I'll fail? That thought triggers more emotion. The emotion fuels another thought. I always fail. The next emotion hits harder. Fear, shame, hopelessness. Now the chemicals flood, adrenaline, cortisol, tension. You're no longer responding to reality. You're responding to your imagination. That's the spiral. It feeds on attention. It grows through repetition. It ends only when you intervene. And that's the mistake most people make. They wait for the spiral to stop on its own. It won't. The longer you let it spin, the deeper it digs. That's why emotional control starts with immediate interruption. You can't control the first emotion, but you can control what happens next. 2. The audit, the opposite of the spiral. The emotional audit is the discipline that replaces reaction with analysis. It's a structured, deliberate process that forces you to slow down and separate data from drama. It transforms chaos into clarity in 60 seconds or less. Here's how it works. Name it. What exactly am I feeling? Be precise. Not bad. Not off. Name it. Anxiety, anger, guilt, embarrassment, disappointment. Precision gives you power. Locate the trigger. What caused this? Was it something external, a comment, an event, or internal, a thought, a fear, an assumption? Extract the data. What is this emotion trying to tell me? Every emotion carries information. Anger means a boundary was crossed. Anxiety means uncertainty. Sadness means loss. Choose the action. What response serves my long-term goal? Not what feels good right now, but what actually works. That's it. For steps. 60 seconds. Total control. You have a choice. You can let emotion dictate your behavior, or you can run the audit and dictate your emotion. That's the key. 3. Why the audit works. The audit breaks the cycle because it forces your brain to switch operating systems. Spiraling activates the emotional brain, the amygdala, the survival center. Auditing activates the prefrontal cortex, the logic and decision center. When you name, analyze, and choose, you're literally moving control from emotion to reason. You're teaching your brain that feelings are not emergencies. They're signals, and signals can be read, understood, and used. This isn't suppression, it's redirection. It's emotional intelligence turned into tactical awareness. You're not pretending the storm doesn't exist. You're just learning to navigate through it instead of being swept away by it. That's emotional control in practice. 4. The cost of living in spirals. People who live in spirals never make progress. They think they're analyzing, but they're really catastrophizing. They call it thinking it through, but it's emotional self-torture disguised as logic. Every spiral costs you time, energy, and confidence. You waste hours replaying conversations, imagining worst-case scenarios, and doubting yourself. You drain the energy that could have built your career, strengthened your relationships, or advanced your goals. That's the price of living without emotional audits. You pay with your focus, your sleep, and your potential. It's not that life is overwhelming. It's that your thoughts are undisciplined. And undisciplined thoughts always spiral. 5. The daily audit habit. You don't master the emotional audit in theory. You master it through repetition. Every day, one entry. One moment. One audit. Write down, what emotion did I feel today? What triggered it? What was it trying to tell me? What action aligns with my goals? Do this for 30 days. No exceptions. You're training your brain to default to observation instead of reaction. You're rewiring the circuitry that controls your emotional state. After 30 days, something changes. The audit stops being something you do and becomes something you are. The moment emotion rises, your mind automatically shifts into analysis. You stop spiraling because the spiral never begins. That's the key. 6. The emotional audit in real life. You receive a critical email. The spiral says, they hate me. I'm failing. I'll lose my job. The audit says, I feel anxiety. The trigger is criticism. The data is insecurity about performance. The action is to clarify expectations and improve. You argue with someone you care about. The spiral says, they don't respect me. This relationship is doomed. The audit says, I feel anger. The trigger is a boundary violation. The data is miscommunication. The action is to address it calmly when emotion subsides. You make a mistake. The spiral says, I always ruin things. I can't do anything right. The audit says, I feel disappointment. The trigger is high standards. The data is the need for patience. The action is to review and adjust. The spiral destroys clarity. The audit restores it. That's the difference between emotional chaos and emotional control. 7. The spiral feeds ego. The audit builds strength. There's another truth people avoid. Spiraling feels good in the moment. It gives the illusion of importance. Look how much I care. It feeds the ego's need for drama and victimhood. It says, my emotions are proof that this matters. But feeling deeply isn't strength. Responding wisely is. The audit strips emotion of ego. It turns intensity into insight. It turns reactivity into discipline. Every audit builds mental armor. Every spiral removes it. You decide which direction you're training toward, control or chaos. That's the key. 8. The transformation. Once you replace spiraling with auditing, your internal world stabilizes. You stop overreacting to minor triggers. You stop losing days to mental noise. You stop being a slave to chemical fluctuations in your brain. You become calm in chaos, analytical under stress, centered under pressure. And people will notice. They'll say, "You seem different, more focused, harder to shake." They'll be right. You're not cold. You're composed. You're not detached. You're deliberate. That's what emotional mastery looks like. 9. Transition. You've now learned the difference between the emotional spiral that drains you and the emotional audit that strengthens you. You've learned how to stop reacting to the noise inside your head and start analyzing the data it sends. You've replaced emotional chaos with structured awareness. But awareness isn't the final step. The next challenge is detachment, the ability to stay committed to outcomes without being emotionally dependent on them. Because control isn't just about analysis, it's about independence. You've stopped spiraling. Now, let's talk about how to detach. Chapter 5. Weaponizing emotional detachment. Emotional detachment is not cold. It's not numb. It's not indifference. It's control. Most people misunderstand it because they confuse calm with carelessness. They think if you're detached, you don't feel. But emotional detachment isn't about feeling less. It's about depending less. It's the ability to care deeply without being destroyed by outcomes. That's the key. 1. Emotional slavery versus emotional freedom. Most people are emotionally enslaved. They need success to feel worthy. They need validation to feel seen. They need relationships to feel whole. They need circumstances to go their way to feel calm. When life doesn't comply, they collapse. Their emotional state rises and falls with the world around them. That's slavery. Your internal peace dictated by external chaos. Emotional freedom begins when you stop needing and start choosing. When you stop attaching your worth to outcomes you can't control. When you stop requiring validation to feel valuable. When you stop letting life decide how you feel. You can prefer, but you cannot require. That's the framework. You prefer success, but you don't require it to respect yourself. You prefer approval, but you don't require it to act. You prefer love, but you don't require it to feel complete. That shift from requirement to preference is the difference between desperation and discipline. 2. Detachment as the ultimate respect. Detachment isn't disrespect. It's the highest form of respect. It means you respect yourself enough not to collapse when things don't go your way. It means you respect others enough to let them choose without trying to control their choices. Clinginess, neediness, obsession, these aren't love. They're control. They're fear disguised as passion. You can't truly connect while trying to control. Detachment allows you to love cleanly, work clearly, and live freely. You stop trying to grip everything so tightly, and paradoxically, that's when things start working. Why? Because desperation repels while composure attracts. Detachment removes pressure from every interaction. You perform better, relate better, decide better. When your emotional stability is independent of the outcome, your power becomes undeniable. That's the key. 3. How to practice emotional detachment. Emotional detachment is a skill. You build it through exposure and repetition. Start by identifying your emotional dependencies. What do you need to go right for you to stay calm? What do you need people to do for you to feel valued? What do you need to happen before you feel safe? Write them down. You'll see your emotional control map clearly. Then dismantle each dependency one by one. For every requirement, replace it with a preference. I need people to respect me becomes I prefer respect, but I stay stable either way. I need to win becomes, I prefer to win, but I remain disciplined regardless. I need certainty becomes, I prefer clarity, but I can operate through uncertainty. That's detachment training. That's emotional reprogramming. You don't remove effort, you remove attachment. You don't stop caring, you stop clinging. 4. Detachment in action. Detachment doesn't make you lazy. It makes you lethal. The athlete trains harder because their worth isn't tied to the medal. The entrepreneur executes relentlessly because failure isn't fatal. The leader makes tough calls because popularity isn't required. When you're detached, you can operate with full intensity because there's no fear underneath. You're not performing for approval. You're performing from mastery. You're not acting to be liked. You're acting to be effective. It's not about apathy. It's about precision. You still want the win, but you don't need it to stay stable. That's why the detached often outperform the desperate. They have no internal noise, only focused execution. That's the key. 5. Emotional detachment in relationships. Detachment in relationships isn't disconnection. It's strength. You can love someone deeply and still be fine without them. You can show compassion without absorbing their chaos. You can care without carrying. People mistake attachment for love, but attachment is dependency. It says, I need you to make me okay. Detachment says, I'm already okay, and I choose you from strength, not need. That's real love. That's real connection. Detachment also protects you from manipulation. When someone realizes they can't control you through approval, silence, or affection withdrawal, their power over you dies instantly. You become emotionally untouchable. 6. The detachment loop. There's a cycle that builds unshakable detachment. Expose yourself to uncertainty. Do things where the outcome is unclear. Feel the discomfort fully. Don't escape it, study it. Stay calm regardless. Train your nervous system to remain grounded even as circumstances fluctuate. Repeat until normal. Each exposure weakens your dependency on external stability. Each repetition makes inner calm your default state. Detachment is not one decision, it's daily conditioning. Every time you stay steady while things fall apart, you're training your nervous system to obey you instead of your environment. That's how emotional independence becomes instinct. 7. The paradox of detachment. The moment you stop needing, everything comes easier. The job you wanted appears after you stop chasing it. The relationship improves after you stopped demanding reassurance. The opportunity arrives after you stopped operating from scarcity. Detachment doesn't reduce success, it multiplies it. Because success flows toward confidence, not desperation. When you're detached, people feel your calm energy. They trust you more. They follow you more. They're drawn to you because you're not trying to extract validation from them. That's the paradox. Emotional distance creates deeper connection. 8. What attachment is not. Let's make this clear. Detachment is not indifference. It's not coldness. It's not avoidance. It's self-governance. It's the ability to operate with emotional balance no matter the situation. It's knowing that emotions are tools, not dictators. It's caring about the process more than the praise. Avoidance hides. Detachment observes. Suppression denies. Detachment accepts. Apathy disconnects. Detachment focuses. Detachment is the discipline of staying centered while the world shakes. 9. The transition from control to command. At first, detachment feels unnatural. You want to grip tighter when things slip. You want to explain yourself when misunderstood. You want to chase outcomes when they drift away. But every time you resist those urges, you build muscle. You're teaching your brain, I'm fine either way. And eventually, that phrase becomes truth. That's when you're no longer controlling emotions, you're commanding them. That's when chaos stops being threatening. It becomes background noise. That's when you're ready for the next level of mastery. 10. Transition. You've learned how to detach emotionally, to pursue outcomes without needing them, to love without losing yourself, and to face chaos without collapse. You now understand that detachment is not withdrawal, it's independence. But there's a sharper layer of control coming next. It's not about long-term detachment. It's about moment-to-moment regulation. It's the split-second discipline that keeps you composed before emotions hijack your system. You've built emotional independence. Now let's master immediate control. Chapter 6. The 3-second rule. Control isn't built in hours of meditation or years of therapy. It's built in 3 seconds. 3 seconds. That's the difference between control and chaos, between composure and collapse. When your emotions spike, anger, anxiety, excitement, frustration, you have a 3-second window before your brain switches systems. Miss that window, and the emotional brain takes over. Catch it, and you stay in command. That's the key. 1. The science of emotional hijack. Your brain runs on 2 systems, logic and emotion. The logical brain, the prefrontal cortex, handles decisions, planning, and discipline. The emotional brain, the amygdala, handles survival, instinct, and reactivity. When something triggers you, your amygdala activates instantly. It floods your body with chemicals, adrenaline, cortisol, tension. In those 3 seconds, your brain decides, will logic stay in control, or will emotion seize the wheel? If you react impulsively, yell, overthink, shut down, you've handed control to the amygdala. Now you're not thinking, you're surviving. And once that switch flips, it can take up to 90 minutes for your body chemistry to return to baseline. That's 90 minutes of irrational thought, regret, and mental noise because you missed the window. The goal isn't to eliminate emotion. It's to intervene before emotion eliminates reason. That's the key. 2. The intervention. The 3-second rule is your emergency brake. It's the fastest way to stop emotional hijack before it starts. Here's the process. Notice the surge. The moment your body changes, heart rate spikes, breath shortens, tension rises, recognize it. That's your signal. Name it. Silently or aloud say, I'm feeling anger. I'm experiencing anxiety. I notice frustration. Pause. Don't act, speak, or decide. Just breathe once, slowly. That's it. You just shifted control from your amygdala to your prefrontal cortex. Why? Because naming the emotion activates logic. It sounds too simple to work, but neuroscience proves it does. Labeling reduces emotional intensity by up to 50%. It doesn't suppress emotion, it regulates it. You're not ignoring the feeling. You're acknowledging it strategically. An acknowledgement breaks the chain of reaction. That's emotional discipline in motion. 3. Why 3 seconds? 3 seconds might sound short, but it's all you need. The goal isn't to eliminate emotion. It's to insert awareness between stimulus and response. 3 seconds is enough to regain choice. Think of it as the space where power lives. Someone insults you. You feel the burn in your chest. That's second 1. You name it, anger. That's second 2. You breathe instead of reacting. That's second 3. Now you've won. You didn't suppress emotion. You intercepted it. You didn't react. You redirected. You turned a reflex into a decision. That's the difference between weakness and mastery. 4. The cost of missing the window. Every time you skip the 3-second rule, you pay. You send the text you regret. You say words that destroy trust. You make decisions driven by panic instead of logic. You lose hours, days, sometimes relationships, all because you couldn't hold silence for 3 seconds. You can't undo what's said in reaction. You can't unsend what's done in emotion. But you can prevent both with a 3-second pause. That pause is not weakness, it's power restraint. Power without control is chaos. Control without awareness is suppression. Power with awareness, that's command. That's what the 3-second rule gives you. 5. Training the reflex. You don't master this rule by thinking about it. You master it by repetition, hundreds of small applications until it becomes instinct. Start small. When someone cuts you off in traffic, feel the heat, pause. When you get a critical message, feel the spike, pause. When you're interrupted mid-sentence, feel the irritation, pause. 3 seconds. Name it. Breathe. Then move. At first, it feels slow, forced. Over time, it becomes automatic. Your nervous system learns, pause first, act later. Eventually, you'll notice that things that once triggered you no longer do. Not because you became indifferent, but because your control caught up with your emotion. That's the evolution. 6. Application in high-stakes situations. The 3-second rule separates amateurs from professionals, especially under pressure. The negotiator who pauses instead of defending gains leverage. The athlete who breathes instead of panicking regains focus. The leader who waits before responding to conflict maintains authority. Emotion clouds perception, control clarifies it. In those 3 seconds, you're not just preventing overreaction, you're sharpening performance. The difference between chaos and composure is not size, it's speed. 3 seconds of awareness turn a reactive human into a disciplined operator. That's the key. 7. The emotional rewire. Each time you apply the rule, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching the neural pathway that awareness comes before action. Over time, the reaction loop gets weaker and the control loop gets stronger. Neuroscience calls this top-down regulation. You're literally strengthening the circuits that give your rational mind command over emotion. It's like building muscle. You can't think yourself into strength. You must lift. The 3-second rule is mental weightlifting. Each pause is a rep. Each rep builds stability. And one day, you realize you no longer fight the urge to react. There is no urge. You've rewired your instinct. 8. From survival to strategy. Most people live in survival mode. Triggered, reactive, emotional. They think they're responding to the world, but they're really reacting to their own chemistry. When you master the 3-second rule, you stop living as prey. You become the strategist of your own emotions. You move from reaction to execution. Emotion still visits, but it doesn't stay. You feel, you name, you choose. And you act from discipline, not impulse. That's real power. 9. Transition. You've learned the emergency brake, the 3-second rule that stops emotional hijack before it starts. You've learned to name emotion instead of obeying it. You've learned that control is not about suppression. It's about awareness in motion. But emotional mastery doesn't end at interruption. It expands into strategy. The next level is learning how to respond to provocations and manipulation with total composure. How to turn silence into dominance. You've mastered the pause. Now, let's master the response. Chapter 7. Stop reacting to provocations. Every day, someone will test your control. A stranger online, a coworker, a family member, a partner. It doesn't matter who. It only matters how you respond. Because every provocation is a test of power, and every reaction is proof that you lost it. That's the game most people never realize they're playing. They think they're defending themselves. They think they're standing up for their truth. They think they're not letting anyone disrespect them. But in reality, they're dancing to someone else's tune. Every time you react emotionally, you confirm that you're easy to control. That's the truth. That's the key. 1. The nature of provocation. Provocation is manipulation in disguise. It's the art of forcing you to react so someone else can feel powerful. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's instinctive. People push buttons to see if they still work. Your job is to make sure those buttons are disconnected. When someone insults you and you take the bait, you've surrendered control. When someone criticizes you and you spiral for days, you've surrendered peace. When someone's behavior ruins your focus, you've surrendered time. That's the cost of emotional reactivity: control, peace, and time. 3 resources you can't afford to waste. The provocateur doesn't need to win the argument. They win the second you react. They live rent-free in your head, pulling strings from a distance. They triggered emotion, and that emotion became your master. You have a choice. You can keep reacting, or you can start responding with power. 2. The test you must pass. Every provocation is the same test in a different disguise. Can you feel the hit and remain composed? Can you register the insult without retaliation? Can you experience anger without expression? If the answer is yes, you pass. If the answer is no, you pay. Failing the test costs energy, attention, and authority. Passing it builds strength, confidence, and composure. Every time you resist the bait, you reclaim power. Every time you refuse to engage, you break conditioning. Every time you stay calm, you reprogram your nervous system to prioritize strategy over impulse. You don't need to win the argument. You need to win the moment. That's the key. 3. The framework: feel, file, forget, focus. Here's your protocol for every provocation. 1. Feel it. You're not a robot. You will feel emotion. That's normal. Acknowledge it silently. I feel anger. I feel frustration. Don't resist it. Just notice it. 2. File it. Store the data. This person showed you how they operate. They revealed their emotional tactics. Make a mental note. Information gathered. 3. Forget it. Drop the thought immediately. No replaying. No storytelling. Don't talk about it. Don't dwell on it. The moment passes because you don't feed it. 4. Focus forward. Redirect your energy to what matters: your work, your mission, your peace. The fastest way to neutralize a provocation is to make it irrelevant by refocusing on purpose. Feel it. File it. Forget it. Focus forward. That's your armor. That's your discipline. 4. Why this works. The provocateur wants a reaction. They want proof that they can still control your emotions. Silence denies them that proof. Calm denies them that satisfaction. And it drives them crazy. Because when you don't react, they lose their weapon. They can't argue with silence. They can't manipulate composure. They can't dominate someone who doesn't need to respond. That's why composure is the ultimate counterattack. It communicates, you don't have access to my peace. That's power. 5. The 30-second rule. You don't need hours of meditation to master this. You need 30 seconds of discipline. When you're provoked, pause. Count to 10. Run the framework. Feel, file, forget, focus. Then move on. If you're still thinking about it 5 minutes later, restart the process. Your control isn't measured by how calm you appear. It's measured by how quickly you can return to center. Mastering that speed is the goal. The faster you move from reaction to neutrality, the stronger your control becomes. That's the difference between professionals and amateurs in life. Speed of recovery. 6. The power of non-reaction. Non-reaction is not weakness. It's the highest form of strength. Anyone can explode. Anyone can rant. Anyone can respond impulsively. That's easy. It takes discipline to stay still when attacked. It takes confidence to remain quiet when provoked. It takes emotional power to watch someone try to trigger you and feel nothing shift inside. The most dangerous people aren't loud, they're calm. Because calm is unreadable, and unreadable is untouchable. That's the key. 7. Real-world application. When your colleague makes a passive-aggressive remark in a meeting, don't correct them. Let silence make them uncomfortable. When someone insults you online, don't reply. Let them drown in their own noise. When your ex sends a message meant to provoke, don't engage. Let them sit with their own emptiness. When a stranger cuts you off in traffic, don't chase. Let them rush to nowhere. Every moment you refuse to react, you're winning a silent war. Your silence is strategy. Your restraint is revenge. 8. The shift in identity. At first, you'll have to remind yourself not to react. You'll feel the pull. You'll want to defend, explain, or fight back. That's conditioning. Your old identity needs validation. But when you practice non-reaction long enough, something shifts. You become the observer, not the reactor. You see the game clearly and stop playing it. Your peace becomes unshakable because you no longer place it in other people's hands. You stop saying, "They made me angry," and start saying, "I chose calm." You stop being triggered and start being tested. And you pass every test. That's mastery. 9. Transition. You've learned how to neutralize provocations. You've learned that reaction is surrender and silence is strategy. You've learned that emotional control isn't about ignoring feelings. It's about choosing power over performance. But control doesn't stop at reaction. It extends to expression. Because emotional mastery isn't just about what you don't show. It's about knowing when and how to show emotion for maximum impact. You've learned restraint. Now, learn precision. Chapter 8. The Power of Strategic Emotional Expression. Emotional control isn't about feeling less. It's about expressing smarter. You can't eliminate emotion. You can't shut it off. But you can weaponize it. That's the difference between suppression and strategy. Suppression is pretending you don't feel anything. Strategy is choosing how and when to feel everything. One hides emotion out of fear. The other directs emotion with purpose. That's the key. 1. The difference between control and suppression. Most people confuse suppression with control. They think being stoic means being numb. They think strength means silence. But silence born from fear isn't strength. It's denial. Suppression always backfires. You can bury emotions temporarily, but they'll leak out as sarcasm, resentment, or burnout. They explode later because you never process them. You just postpone them. Control, on the other hand, means awareness. You see the emotion rise. You understand what it's telling you. And then you choose strategically whether to express it, how to express it, and to whom. Control says, "I feel it. I study it. I decide." Suppression says, "I don't feel it." One builds power. The other builds pressure. 2. The strategy of expression. Emotional expression is a tool. Like any tool, it can build or destroy depending on how it's used. Before expressing, ask one question. Does showing this emotion serve my goal in this situation? That's the filter. That's the difference between control and chaos. If the answer is yes, express it with precision. If the answer is no, contain it until you're in the right place with the right person at the right time. Context decides everything. Anger shown during a boundary violation. Strategic builds respect. Anger shown at a minor inconvenience. Destructive erodes trust. Vulnerability shown to your partner. Strategic builds intimacy. Vulnerability shown to your competitor. Dangerous gives leverage. Same emotion, different context, different outcome. Emotion isn't good or bad. Expression determines value. 3. Timing is everything. You can't control when emotion appears, but you can control when you express it. Reactive expression means the emotion chooses the timing. Strategic expression means you do. The emotion says now. You say, not yet. You feel anger in the meeting, but express it in private, once calm. You feel hurt by the comment, but address it later with clarity. You feel excitement about an opportunity, but reveal it only when it strengthens your position. Timing transforms emotion from liability into leverage. That's what the emotionally undisciplined never understand. They believe authenticity means immediacy. But power lives in restraint. You can be genuine without being impulsive. You can be honest without being emotional. You can be expressive without being exposed. That's mastery. 4. The 4 rules of strategic expression. Rule 1. Never express emotion at peak intensity. When emotions spike, logic is offline. Wait until the chemicals fade. Then speak. Your clarity grows as adrenaline drops. Rule 2. Never express emotion to prove something. If you're expressing to be understood, that's clarity. If you're expressing to be validated, that's weakness. You don't need permission to feel, only direction to act. Rule 3. Express only to advance outcomes, not relieve pressure. Expression should move the situation forward, not just make you feel better. If it releases emotion but damages reputation, it wasn't strategic, it was indulgent. Rule 4. Own your delivery. When you choose to express, do it with precision. Clear tone, controlled body language, minimal words, maximum impact. Power is quiet when it's real. Follow these 4 rules, and every emotional expression becomes a tactical move. 5. Strategic vulnerability. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's information control. Weak people spill emotions everywhere, hoping someone else will regulate them. Strong people disclose emotions selectively to build connection or trust intentionally. Strategic vulnerability says, I choose what to reveal, when to reveal, and why. You share pain to build understanding, not sympathy. You share truth to deepen trust, not gain validation. Authenticity without boundaries is emotional exhibitionism. Boundaried authenticity is leadership. 6. The power of controlled anger. Anger, when expressed strategically, commands attention. When expressed impulsively, it destroys authority. Leaders use anger sparingly, like thunder after silence. They express it to draw lines, not to discharge emotion. It's not shouting, it's signaling. The goal isn't to be calm forever. The goal is to control the volume, timing, and precision of emotional expression so every display of feeling has purpose. That's emotional control at scale. Anger becomes message, not meltdown. 7. Emotional expression as influence. People follow emotional clarity. They trust those who feel deeply but act deliberately. Your ability to express emotion strategically builds credibility. It shows composure under pressure. It communicates confidence through calm. When you reveal the right emotion in the right moment, you become magnetic. Your energy stabilizes others instead of infecting them. Your composure becomes contagious. You lead not through dominance, but through control. That's influence. 8. Practicing strategic expression. Here's how to train it. Pause first. Never express emotion in real time. Create distance. Name the emotion. Clarity begins with identification. I feel anger. I feel sadness. I feel excitement. Ask the strategy question. Does expressing this now serve my goal? Choose the form. Speak it. Write it. Act it. Or decide silence is stronger. Deliver with control. Neutral tone. Grounded posture. Minimal explanation. The more you practice this, the more emotional discipline becomes muscle memory. You stop blurting. You start directing. You stop reacting. You start orchestrating. That's what separates emotional professionals from emotional amateurs. 9. The discipline of discretion. Sometimes the most strategic expression is none at all. Knowing what not to say, when not to show, and who not to tell, that's power. People who lack discretion believe everything felt must be shared. People with control understand that mystery creates respect. You don't owe the world access to your emotional life. Hold more. Speak less. Your silence will start to speak louder than emotion ever could. 10. Transition. You've learned that suppression is weakness, but strategy is power. You've learned that emotion isn't the enemy. Impulse is. You've learned to control timing, audience, and delivery, so emotion becomes influence, not instability. You've learned that strategic emotional expression isn't about hiding who you are, it's about mastering how you show who you are. But emotional mastery doesn't just happen in isolation, it's forged through exposure. And the more discomfort you face, the more disciplined you become. You've learned control. Now learn resilience. Chapter 9. Building emotional resilience through exposure. Emotional control isn't built in comfort. It's built in exposure. Exposure to pressure. Exposure to discomfort. Exposure to the emotions you usually avoid. You don't get stronger by escaping tension. You get stronger by enduring it. That's the truth most people never face. They chase comfort, then wonder why they collapse at the first sign of stress. If your life has been designed to avoid discomfort, your emotional muscles have atrophied. You've trained fragility, not resilience. That's why you break under minor pressure, because you've never practiced staying calm in the storm. The mind doesn't grow through ease. It grows through exposure. That's the key. 1. Emotional tolerance equals emotional power. Your emotional control is directly proportional to your tolerance for discomfort. If you've only experienced comfort, small inconveniences feel catastrophic. If you've never faced rejection, criticism will crush you. If you've never sat in boredom, focus will always escape you. If you've never endured uncertainty, you'll mistake anxiety for danger. Most people's problem isn't emotion, it's intolerance to emotion. They've never built capacity to hold tension without reacting. Resilience means you can feel discomfort fully and still execute. You can feel fear and still move. You can feel pain and still decide. You can feel pressure and still perform. That's control under fire. That's the skill that separates operators from amateurs. 2. Why comfort breeds weakness. Comfort is seductive because it promises safety. But comfort slowly erodes capability. Every time you avoid a difficult conversation, you train avoidance. Every time you reach for distraction when anxious, you train dependency. Every time you soothe discomfort instantly, you train fragility. You become emotionally soft, not because you lack talent, but because you refuse exposure. And softness shows the moment life stops cooperating. When stress hits, comfort-trained minds crumble. They overreact. They catastrophize. They retreat. The solution isn't to chase pain, it's to stop running from it. You can't control the chaos of life, but you can train your nervous system to meet it calmly. That's the real definition of resilience. 3. Deliberate exposure. Resilience doesn't happen accidentally. It's trained through deliberate exposure. You practice sitting with emotions you'd rather avoid until your system learns they're survivable. Anxiety, boredom, frustration, rejection, fear. You expose yourself to each one, not to suffer, but to build capacity. Every exposure expands your range. Every repetition makes you less reactive. Here's how. Sit with anxiety. When discomfort rises, don't reach for your phone. Don't distract yourself. Breathe. Observe the sensation. Let peak and pass. Embrace boredom. Don't fill every silent moment. Let your mind wander. Creativity and clarity live beneath boredom. Face rejection. Ask, apply, risk, and know. Learn to detach self-worth from approval. Confront fear. Do the thing you hesitate to do. Speak when your voice shakes. Move when your mind stalls. Every repetition teaches your nervous system the same truth. Discomfort won't kill you. Avoidance weakens you. Exposure fortifies you. That's how warriors are built, not through theory, but through tension. 4. Voluntary hardship. Voluntary hardship is the gym of the mind. You choose small, controlled challenges to train emotional stability before life forces you into bigger ones. Cold showers, fasting, early mornings, difficult conversations, silent reflection. Each is a rep in the discipline of discomfort. Cold showers train composure under physical stress. Fasting trains restraint under desire. Early mornings train discipline under fatigue. Hard conversations train truth under tension. Silence trains focus under noise. The activity doesn't matter. The consistency does. You're not training for the task itself. You're training the identity of someone who doesn't flinch. That's emotional armor. That's resilience in motion. 5. The law of exposure. There's a universal law. What you repeatedly face, you eventually master. Face discomfort daily, and your threshold expands. Face chaos repeatedly, and chaos stops feeling chaotic. Face fear consistently, and fear transforms into focus. Avoid these emotions, and they own you. Expose yourself to them, and you own them. Every exposure session rewires your brain. It desensitizes the fear centers and strengthens the control circuits. You literally become someone who can handle more. Resilience isn't about pretending things don't bother you. It's about increasing your capacity to handle what does, without losing control. 6. The emotional load principle. Think of emotion like weight training. The more emotional load you can carry without collapsing, the stronger you are. Start with light weight, mild discomfort. Don't overtrain by jumping into trauma-level exposure. You're not trying to break yourself. You're trying to build yourself. You build progressive tolerance. Handle frustration without quitting. Handle rejection without rumination. Handle anxiety without avoidance. Handle criticism without collapse. Each layer of emotional weight you lift makes the next one lighter. Soon, what once broke you becomes warm-up. That's growth. 7. Turning resistance into ritual. To make exposure effective, it must be ritualized. Schedule discomfort like you schedule training. Wake up early even when you don't want it. Take the cold shower even when your mind protests. Have a difficult talk instead of letting it fester. Say no to instant pleasure just to feel the resistance. Each action says, I choose challenge. Discipline begins where comfort ends. Your job is to step past that threshold daily until resistance becomes routine. That's how you reprogram your nervous system from avoidance to adaptability. 8. From fragility to fortitude. Most people live like emotional glass, strong until pressure hits. Resilient people are like steel tempered by heat. The heat is discomfort. The tempering is repetition. Every exposure strengthens your structure. Every repetition forges your composure. Until one day, the same situations that once triggered you barely register. You don't have to pretend to be calm. You are calm. That's the transformation, from reacting emotionally to operating intentionally. 9. Transition. You've learned that comfort kills control. You've learned that emotional power comes from exposure, not avoidance. You've learned to treat discomfort as training, not punishment. Resilience isn't about what happens to you. It's about how much you can handle without losing clarity. But control and resilience mean nothing if they're not integrated into your identity. The final stage is mastery. The moment control becomes automatic and emotion becomes data, not disturbance. You've built resilience. Now, let's complete the transformation. Chapter 10. From emotional control to emotional mastery. Emotional control is the foundation. Emotional mastery is the evolution. Control requires effort. Mastery requires identity. At first, you try to control your emotions. You count to 3. You breathe. You audit. You pause. You remind yourself not to react, not to spiral, not to explain. That's control. But mastery begins when you stop trying and start being. You don't think about it anymore. It's just who you are. The reaction never even forms. The pause is automatic. The calm is default. That's the shift from control to mastery. 1. The invisible stage of power. At the mastery level, your emotional regulation disappears from consciousness. You're no longer managing your reactions. You've rewired them. You no longer fight impulses. They don't arise in the same way. Your nervous system has learned neutrality. You've practiced awareness, restraint, and perspective so many times that your system operates on a new baseline. The gap between stimulus and response has become reflex. The audit process runs in the background of your mind. The 3-second rule isn't a tool, it's instinct. That's emotional automation. That's mastery. People will call you calm. They'll call you unshakable. They'll say you seem different. They won't understand that it's not personality, it's programming. You've trained your mind to stay clear under chaos. You've built the habits until they replace the old identity. You don't force peace. You embody it. 2. You have emotions. They don't have you. At the mastery stage, emotions don't vanish. You still feel the full range. You still experience anger, sadness, fear, and excitement. But they no longer define you. They move through you without steering you. That's the difference between control and mastery. Control requires effort to manage emotion. Mastery experiences emotion without attachment. You stop saying, I am angry, and start saying, anger is present. You stop saying, I am anxious, and start saying, anxiety is passing. You become the observer instead of the participant. You hold your emotional weather without losing your internal climate. The storm passes. You remain unmoved. That's the key. 3. The process that built the master. Mastery doesn't arrive in one leap. It's built through 10,000 micro-decisions. Every pause instead of reaction. Every audit instead of spiral. Every breath instead of explosion. Every detached response instead of emotional chase. Each moment of awareness rewires neural pathways. Each small victory compounds into identity change. You don't decide to be calm anymore. You are calm. You don't try to hold composure. You live from composure. You've built the habit so deeply that discipline transformed into nature. That's why emotional mastery can't be faked. You can't pretend to be calm. You either are or you aren't. You can't imitate stillness. You either embody it or you expose your chaos. The work is invisible, but the results are undeniable. 4. The markers of emotional mastery. How do you know you've crossed from control into mastery? There are signs. You respond slower, but more effectively. You act only when the timing is right. You feel emotion fully, but recover instantly. Pain, anger, and fear lose their grip. You stop seeking validation. You need no audience to confirm your stability. You no longer dramatize setbacks. Everything is feedback, not failure. You project calm even under attack. Your energy regulates the room. That's when you know you've crossed over. The chaos outside no longer dictates the clarity inside. Mastery isn't loud. It's silent authority. You don't command attention. You command energy. 5. The discipline behind ease. From the outside, mastery looks effortless. But inside, it's built from relentless repetition. People see composure. They don't see the 1,000 moments of restraint. They see calm confidence. They don't see the nights of self-reflection. They see stillness. They don't see the years of exposure to discomfort that trained it. Mastery is what discipline looks like after enough mileage. At first, you practice discipline with intention. Later, discipline practices itself through you. You no longer manage emotions because your operating system has already filtered reactions before they surface. You've replaced instinctive chaos with instinctive calm. That's not luck. That's training. 6. Emotion as data. Once again, at mastery, you return to the truth of Chapter 1. Emotions are data. But now you interpret that data instantly and accurately. Anger appears. You recognize it as a boundary signal. Fear arises. You read it as a need for preparation. Sadness surfaces. You identify it as a cue for reflection. You process the data and execute, all within seconds. No spiral, no story, no self-judgment. You've become fluent in the language of emotion. That fluency is the hallmark of mastery, not the absence of emotion, but total understanding of it. 7. The calm that commands. At this stage, calm isn't passive, it's commanding. Your stillness influences others. Your composure anchors chaos. Your presence becomes regulation for everyone around you. You don't have to demand respect. People feel it. You don't have to assert control. You're control. Your power is no longer in how you react. It's in how little you need to. You don't chase outcomes. You shape them. You don't fight emotion. You guide it. That's the apex of mastery, when calm becomes contagious. 8. The paradox of mastery. The paradox is this. When you stop trying to control emotion, control becomes effortless. The harder you chase peace, the more it escapes. The moment you accept every feeling as part of the process, peace arrives naturally. You transcend the cycle of managing emotions and begin living with them as allies. Each one informs you, none control you. That's not resistance, it's integration. You've stopped fighting emotion and started working with it. You've stopped suppressing life and started experiencing it without distortion. That's the highest form of freedom. 9. The continuous path. Emotional mastery isn't a finish line. It's a lifestyle. You don't graduate from discipline. You live inside it. Every challenge is another rep. Every disruption is another test. Every reaction you resist refines your state further. You don't strive for perfection. You aim for presence. Because presence is perfection. It's where emotion exists but doesn't dominate. It's where power feels effortless because it's integrated. 10. Transition and closing. You've reached the final evolution, emotional mastery. You've learned to pause before reacting. You've learned to observe instead of spiral. You've learned to act strategically instead of emotionally. You've learned that emotions are not enemies. They're information. Now, you no longer wrestle with them. You work with them. You no longer control them. You coexist with them. This is mastery, the state where emotional power and mental clarity merge into one. And once you reach this point, you'll never look at chaos the same way again, because chaos no longer threatens you. It serves you. It reveals your calm. It confirms your control. You've reached mastery. Now live it. Emotions once ruled you. Now they report to you. So, here's what you've discovered now. Your emotions are not commands. They're data. They're information about your internal state that you can observe, analyze, process, and then choose how to respond. You know that there's a gap between what happens to you and how you respond, and that gap is where all your power lies. You know that you must stop explaining your emotions and start analyzing them. You've learned the 3-second rule that prevents emotional hijacking. You know you must stop reacting to provocations and start filing them away as information. You know that emotional detachment is not coldness, it's freedom. You know that strategic expression means that emotions serve your goals, not the other way around. You know that exposure to discomfort builds resilience, which makes future emotions manageable. And you know that mastery is possible, that you can reprogram your default operating system so that emotional control becomes automatic. So here's your challenge. Start practicing the pause right now, today. The next time you feel a strong emotion, pause for 3 seconds. Identify the emotion. Ask yourself what it is telling you. Choose your response based on strategy, not impulse. Do this once today, then repeat it tomorrow, and the day after that. Repeat this process every day for the next 90 days. Because emotional control is not a trait you are born with, it is not a gift. It is a skill you develop through repetition. Stop being controlled by your feelings. Stop reacting to everything around you. Stop letting your emotions make your decisions. Start observing. Start pausing. Start choosing. Master your emotions. Master your life.